People always make fun of the phrase end game in hobbies because, you know, they're like, you'll be back. You'll be back. This is not a healthy relationship. You'll be back. I mean, you don't know, I could change. I could make scientific breakthroughs in clicks and clacks and thocks. I could make even prettier keycap sets, even more inventive and imaginative keyboard cases. You'll be back. And I'm your cool Uncle Marissa, and I'm back. Kind of, not really. So for me, the Saturn 60, which I did like a weird ASMR video thing on, was my end game. And I think it still is. Like, I don't think I'm going to ever get another 60 or larger keyboard. I think that's the one for me. But I picked up the Ortho 48 and I suddenly was like, oh, I really like smaller keyboards. And I did a video on that. It's a $35 keyboard. It's insane for the value. Stick some foam in it and you've got like a really nice keyboard for 35 bucks. I did a video on that too. And the reason I'm doing this video is because my keyboard videos are insanely popular. But I gotta remind myself, this channel is for me above all, right? So I got really fixated on finding a 40% keyboard that would be my endgame 40. And there were a few things that I was interested in, like the QAZ Fold was really cute, but it was a bit expensive at the time, couldn't really justify it, and then it was gone. And then fast forward to some months ago, and in the Playdate Discord, I saw someone with like a photo of their Playdate next to like the cutest 40% keyboard. And this, my friends, was the Detour40. And it is adorable. I've got it right here. Hoo-wee! It is tiny, but it's bulky. It's got an OLED screen, it's got a knob, it's got like 4 buttons at the top. I'm just like such a sucker too for this kind of profile. I mean, my Saturn 60 is this profile. I just love keyboards that hark back to typewriters and old like computers. It's so exciting. It's such good design. Not to like hate on anyone, but sometimes you'll see people who have like 20 different keyboards and they're all like black with black keys with white legends. And it's like, where is your whimsy? Where is the beauty of variety? But you know, you do you. But for me, I think that's actually a good thing because these things are kind of far and few between, these like super intriguing designs. So I'm not constantly like throwing money at keyboards or trying to be like, well, which one's gonna be my end game? So Detour, I went all in and part of the group buy, and I got it. It was a great experience because it was just a small group of people. It was designed by Nachi, who is a very cool person in the 40s keyboard community, and was sold on R&D KBD, which is a Canadian-based small, teeny tiny vendor. Enough talk, let's go ahead and build it. The Detour arrives in a really nice hard shell case that's like custom fit to it. We've got the Syndrome Ortho PCB with some ladies on it, the plate, the PCB for the top section, and the plate for that. And here is the case itself. It is hefty. Now, here is a little issue that came with the Ortho PCB round 1. Just there was a hang that had to be scraped off there. And then we need to do a little bodge wire. It's pretty small, but it's so big compared to the bodge wire I had to do for my BMO Pocket Color. From the CPU to the ribbon cable connector. That was truly a thing. Of course, whether I show it or not, I'm always gonna flux things up before I solder. And with keyboard PCBs, I find the flux pen is plenty good enough. And there we have our bodge wire. This is fixed in future revisions, by the way, so don't worry about it. All right, let's open the case so we can put everything in it. I always appreciate the little IKEA-style Allen key inclusions in keyboard kits. But then I feel bad because I'm like, what do I do with all these Allen keys? And we put the plate. And we're gonna screw the plate in. I think the instructions said to put the top screws in first, and then it never told me when to put in the bottom screws. But I did so eventually. I don't think it matters if you screw in the bottom now. All right, and then we're gonna put in the knob. I'm gonna solder that in. And then I'm gonna add my switches. So these are the MMD Princess tactile switches. They're very pretty. They're quite heavy switches. They require a lot of force. So these are really nice actually for the top. I'm gonna go ahead and use them throughout and see how that ends up feeling. But they've definitely got that really nice feel for like a macro pad or something. I have them in my macro pad actually. All right, and now I put the header pins in the OLED component, and we're gonna solder the pins on. And then they wouldn't fit. So for this first revision, they did not make the clearance tight enough. So I have done something I've never done before in getting something into a PCB, rubber mallet. I was so scared. Okay, and then we can solder on the switches. I'm using this Madeline VHS to hold it up so the switches don't fall out. And soldering in the header pins as well. Some people on the Discord said they didn't even solder in the header pins for the OLED screen because it was so tight. It was just working without soldering, which is kind of hilarious. But again, nothing to worry about if you order a future revision in round 2, which I think seems like it might happen in the fall or winter. But anyway, we're going to trim those pins and then reflow just to make sure our connections are good. And I'm going to put the washer, as my middle school tech ed teacher used to say, to secure the knob. And then we're just going to clean up with some isopropyl alcohol. All right, daughter board time. So this is a USB-C daughter board, and we're gonna screw this in with the connector in so that we don't have to finagle it. There's not a lot of room to budge with this, but I always try to push it as close to the cutout as possible. And because we're doing a plate mount and not a PCB mount, we can cut off these little screw posts. I actually really appreciate how flexible the installation methods are for setting up this keyboard. You know, you've got PCB or plate mount, and you can take those off if you're doing a plate mount. And they also have a guide on the build guide of Butterfingers of which parts of the plate to screw in, depending on how you want the feel to be. And so if you do the middle of each of these legs, that's supposed to give you the flexiest feel. Now I'm doing this upside down, which is very cool and edgy of me. I also took this opportunity to screw in the plate on the top section. And I'm gonna add in the switches. It's so funny being able to just like hold this with one hand and just pop the switches in. It's definitely a bit challenging to get the switches to stay in without the PCB on the row where there aren't individual cutouts and it's just one long bar. I go like an embarrassingly long time without noticing that it's upside down. But we do notice, and we're able to flip it. At an alarming speed. And then back to putting in the switches. I went with like all one unit initially, which was a bit silly. I actually, after the video, I ended up swapping over to a split 2-unit space bar at the bottom row, which is much more manageable and just makes more sense. Okay, and then we're gonna snap the plate on. This is very fun because a few switches fell out while I was doing this as well. It also was harder to align the switches on that one uniform row, so that's something I will deal with later. And then I generally will solder the switches on each corner before going through and soldering everything else, maybe the middle as well, just so that we have those kind of support posts. You can see I'm using my phone to keep it up now. The shape definitely, it definitely makes the soldering process like you need to have a bit of a support the way that you wouldn't with like a plank style typical keyboard. Once we're done soldering the switches, we can use the ribbon cable to attach the top PCB to the bottom one. I really do not like these types of ribbon cables. You find them in like the PlayStation as well, and in a lot of like audio components, but you're gonna have to flatten it, so I'm just trying to do it as gently as possible. And then I'm gonna connect the connector to the daughter board, and then we can just sit it all together and start with like the final touches. Whenever I put on stickers or anything with adhesive backing, this is a nice way to do it. You tend to get it straight and nothing gets stuck under it, and it's also just very satisfying. All right, so I'm gonna put the cover on the OLED screen. I'm being like so careful, but it's too big. Why is it so big? So I thought I'd file it down. They actually included adhesive for it, but I think this is just gonna be pressure fitted at this point. More filing because it's too wide and it's also too tall. I don't want to go too far because I don't want it to be too small. And we finally got it. It's such a bummer because I wanted to make sure there's no fingerprints on it, but by the time I was done with it, I mean, I can't see any fingerprints on it to be honest, but so much for that. The knob is left over from the Zoom 65 I'd gotten. I'd gotten it as an extra for pre-ordering it, and it was like a Lunar New Year thing, and I'm so happy I kept it because it looks really cute here. And this is an SA key cap set that I got from AliExpress. It was $20 a set, and I figured I would mix them for my signature colors. They are not the most high quality keycaps, but honestly, I wasn't able to spend a ton of money, so something that's pretty and feels nice in the meantime is pretty neat. They are a bit extra though with the switches I'm using. There's just so much pressure needed. And it is done. And it is tiny, tiny, tiny. And this is my Mahjong artisan from my friend Fanny, who I will put her information in the description too. She makes the cutest artisans, but also just look, don't buy the things I want to buy from her. Because the last time I wanted to buy artisan from her, it got sold out before I could do anything. I'm kidding, please do buy from her. Anyway, final thoughts. I love it. I think it's a great end game. The sound is so good. Like, I mean, we did a typing test, but it's just so, these are not the best keycaps. Obviously, AliExpress, $20 a set, but you know, I was not really in a position to be spending a ton of money, especially after spending $200 on this tiny little thing here. But yeah, it was pretty easy to put together. There were a couple of snags, but again, this was a tiny like little group buy. The snags, just to mention them, first off, there was like a weird hang on the PCB. So that had to be scraped with like an X-Acto knife or something, and that solved that issue. But regardless of there being a solution, the wonderful folks at R&D KBD, they're just like, yeah, we'll send out replacement ortho PCBs to people who had that issue. So that's wonderful. Similarly, I'm having issues with the USB-C connector where I just have to like plug and unplug several times in order for it to actually make a connection with my computer. And they sent me a replacement daughter board. Unfortunately, that didn't work. So fingers crossed the replacement PCB is gonna be the solution, I imagine. I mean, what else could it be? But, you know, completely just like huge props for the customer service around such a small project, especially. There's been a lot of drama in the last, I mean, I guess I feel like, you know, kind of all of the hobbies that have kind of gotten a lot of popularity during COVID. It's not just like popularity with people, but a lot of people who aren't necessarily passionate becoming investors, so to speak. We're seeing a lot of the fallout of that. A lot of people basically ending up finding out that they've been scammed, and just a lot of trust has crumbled in the mechanical keyboard communities. So it's just really wonderful to find communities where it is just such a passion project and there is a desire for things to be right. I would say keep an eye on their projects. I'll leave all their information below as well if this is the kind of thing you're interested in. I would say let me know if you want to see more keyboard videos, but this is supposed to be my last one. And statistically, I don't think you guys really like the keyboard videos, so it's probably for the best. So just watch the ones I have on repeat. I think that's a good idea. If you've made it this far, thank you for sticking around and watching this build video and humoring my love of hobbies other than modding retro consoles. A big thank you to my Ko-fi supporters. You too can have a big thank you. If you visit my Ko-fi, you can make a donation, you can purchase or download free resources, and you can leave me a nice note too. It's basically the McDonald's play place, but less gross. I've been your cool Uncle Marissa, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.